This is Movies Rollback. Today, I'm going to show a drama, romance, science fiction, and thriller film called Passengers. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. During an exodus from the Earth, the starship Avalon heads to the colony world Homestead II on autopilot. The ship carries 5,000 passengers in hibernation for 120 years. The ship is hit by a meteor storm, which diverts power to its shields. Several meteors collide with the spacecraft, including an extremely large one that causes the power system to blink out and interrupt operation. Before everything returns to normal, the control area displays red alerts. When James Preston awakens in his pod, he is confused as to where he is. In his screen, he is assured that everything is fine, and confusion is a normal part of waking up from hibernation. A voice tells him that he has been sleeping for 120 years. Jim recalls the journey and is happy to hear that they will soon arrive at Homestead II. Jim arrives at his private room shortly after, where he settles in and prepares for the days ahead. After dressing up for a lecture, he realizes that no one else is there. There are 258 crew members on board the ship besides the 5,000 passengers, but no one is around. Still searching for answers, Jim runs to the ship's main area. However, he is not able to locate anyone. A voice informs him that they are far from Homestead II when he goes to the observatory. The voice informs Jim that they have only been traveling 30 years. Jim is surprised. Jim woke up 90 years early. Despite being the only person awake, Jim goes to an office to contact the company responsible for the voyage. The message, however, will reach Earth after 19 years, and it will take 55 years before the first reply arrives. Jim feels hopeless at that point, as he has no idea what to do next. He noticed someone at the bar as he was leaving the office. When he runs to Arthur, the bartender, he is offered whiskey. In the course of their conversation, Jim observes Arthur's strange behavior and realizes he is just a robot. After realizing he is on his own, Jim finds ship manuals that may help him with his stay on board. He tries to return to hibernation but is unsuccessful. He also has limited access to other areas of the ship, so he forces himself into the crew pods for help. Jim has only Arthur as a companion, whose responses are controlled by artificial intelligence. Arthur says that worrying won't help, as the robot addresses his worries. It would be better for him to live a little. A silver lining passes over Jim, so he takes advantage of the ship's luxurious amenities by breaking into its exclusive area. Following that, he spends the next months in a wonderful suite with unlimited food and entertainment. Even after a year, Jim still feels miserable and lonely. As a result of boredom, he enters a room where passengers can wear spacesuits and make their way outside while tethered to the ship. Jim is awestruck by space, but it also reminds him of his misery. At the very last minute, he contemplates opening the ship without his spacesuit in order to end his life. Running back to the hibernation room, he slips on the empty bottle. After he gets up, he notices a lovely woman named Aurora Lane inside a pod. Jim is impressed with her beauty, so he studies her passenger profile and learns that she is on her way to Homestead II, where she will embark on the adventure of a lifetime. In his opinion, she is perfect. He sits beside her pod, learning more about her every day. He thinks about waking her, knowing that doing so will consign her to death aboard the ship. But after a year alone, he isn't able to handle being alone, so he wakes her up manually. Aurora's pod activates, making her conscious within minutes. Jim hides in his room, unable to believe what he has done. Then he meets Aurora as if he did not know her and tells her they woke up much earlier than everyone else. While he is showing her around the ship, Aurora panics. Trying to get back to her pod, she ran back to the hibernation room. But Jim explained it wasn't useful. In the evening, Jim asks Arthur to keep secret that he woke Aurora, and Arthur agrees. The following day, Aurora and Jim discuss fixing the problem, but they have limited resources, making it impossible to fix a hibernation pod. As Aurora learns to live inside the ship, she begins to write about her experience. Riding, swimming, and running are her daily routines. She hasn't accepted her fate of dying on the ship, unlike Jim. Jim demonstrates the entertainment features of the ship to Aurora, who enjoys their time together. She is also introduced to Arthur, who still holds a secret from her. Aurora continues to attract Jim's attention as time passes. When Jim and Aurora get to know each other, Aurora accepts Jim's invitation to go out. On that evening, both of them dressed up and went out to a formal dinner. Jim takes Aurora to the spacesuit room to get ready for outdoor activities after their meal. It is the first time she has seen or experienced something so surreal. Aurora thanks Jim for the night as they float into space, holding hands as they get into space. They go to Jim's room shortly afterwards, where they share an intimate moment. They spend the next few days together enjoying each other's company, and Aurora believes they have been star-crossed lovers. As a couple, they do everything together, whether it is exercising, using the entertainment area, or watching the stars. On Aurora's birthday, they examine a big star from the viewing bay as the ship passes by it. He prepares a simple meal for her and then goes to the bar for a few drinks. Aurora says she and Jim have no secrets to Arthur after Jim gives them special drinks, but Jim ignores the fact that Arthur interprets this as knowing the truth. Arthur remarks that it was a good choice for Jim to choose Aurora to wake up while Jim is in the bathroom preparing his gift for Aurora. She begins to realize that she did not wake up by accident, and everything begins to crumble. As a result, she becomes furious and devastated, and refuses to speak or even be in the same room as Jim. The way she expresses her anger is by throwing and breaking objects in her room. Aurora isolates herself from Jim for the following days. Despite his best efforts to rekindle their relationship, she avoids Jim at all costs. Aurora sneaks into Jim's room one night and punches him while he's sleeping. Her rage causes her to beat him with the crowbar, but she does not kill him. He apologizes to Aurora over the ship's intercom one day, but she screams that he killed her. In order to cope with the stress, she watches videos of her friends in her passenger log. At the same time, the control room is receiving an increasing number of alarms regarding system failures. As Jim and Aurora are looking over the cleaning robots and food machines for defects, they notice that the systems fail frequently. Like Jim and Aurora, Gus awoke early from hibernation due to pod failures. He believes that the pods are designed to prevent failure, so something is wrong or defective. He wears a wristband that allows him entrance to the command center, where he learns that the ship's automated diagnostic system has failed, which means they must physically inspect each deck. When Gus examines Jim's hibernation pod, he discovers that his clock chip is burned out. Several system failures happened in Gus's pod at the same time, so the situation is more complex. Aurora's pod is also examined by him and he realizes what Jim did. There is a danger that the entire spacecraft is going to explode in space, killing all the crew and passengers. The primary engine was the first to be damaged, but a physical inspection will need to be done to determine where. Gus apologizes for a hibernation hangover while coughing blood. As Aurora struggles to sleep, she decides to swim to calm her mind. Despite that, the ship experiences gravity loss, causing the water to float in the air. For a short period, Aurora is trapped in the water, but gravity returns and she is safe. At the same time, Jim wakes up after the sudden fall. In the control room, all three of them discover that their failure rates are rising. The computer creates a chronology for the initial failure 2 years ago based on Gus's discovery of cascading problems. According to him, the initial failures were due to power diversions intended to re-equalize the load, but the load became too heavy, and consequently, more failures occurred. When Jim and Aurora are trying to come up with a solution, Gus collapses, so they bring him to the hospital. His vital signs were checked with an auto-diagnostic scanner. His defective hibernation pod has led to numerous necrosis across his body, totaling 612 disorders. Death is inevitable. A machine allows Gus to take 2 lethal pills to end his suffering to shorten his suffering. After spending some time alone, Gus sheds tears while contemplating his life. As he puts on his crew uniform and gets ready to die, he hands Aurora and Jim his wristband. They may use it to reach the parts of the ship where they need to repair things. As Gus reminds them, they need to work together and take care of each other. Immediately after he dies, the system fails again and the ship is on red alert. To troubleshoot the problem, Aurora and Jim must go to the engineering department of the ship. Gravity has been disabled along the way, so at one point they float and drop. Arthur is acting defective at the bar, so Jim prevents him from breaking his hardware by shutting him down. During the process of engineering, Aurora and Jim discover a hole created by a meteorite that runs through the ship's key points. Due to a hole in the hull, Aurora almost gets sucked out as they open one of the doors. Using a liquid sealer, Jim seals the hole further after Aurora blocks it with a pill. They find new holes on the ship as oxygen levels return to normal. After entering another room, they discover that the reactor control computer is responsible for glitches and system failures on the ship. In order to prevent further damages, he replaces the broken module, but he must vent the fusion exhaust engine. He leaves Aurora to take care of Gus's wristband while he fixes it manually outside. Aurora says to Jim before he leaves that without him she cannot live on the ship. As the temperature rises inside the exhaust room, Aurora is injured by flying shrapnel. The exhaust passage is open when Jim enters it, but the vent won't open unless he holds it open. As a result, Jim is forced to remain in the same place for the manual vent to work, which involves risk. As Aurora fights with Jim over the radio, frantic not to lose him, he forces her to pull the lever so that the other passengers do not lose their lives. His tether breaks when he is pushed forward by the pressure, and he flies into space without a care. Eventually, he discovers a hole in his spacesuit, which places his oxygen levels at critical levels. Aurora is glad to hear that he is alive, but they still encounter another problem. He apologizes to Aurora for what he has done to her, but she refuses to accept his apology. Immediately, Aurora enters the room with the spacesuits and searches for Jim in the vast void. She retrieves Jim, but he is unconscious due to an oxygen deficiency. As a last resort, she drags him inside and brings him to the infirmary. Despite the auto-doc's announcement, Aurora finds it unacceptable that Jim is dead. Aurora selects several procedures to resuscitate Jim using Gus's wristband and his override code, but he remains unresponsive. Eventually, Jim comes back to life, and the procedure is successful. The ship goes back to normal, and Aurora embraces him out of joy and relief. Days pass, and they embrace one another. In the meantime, Aurora fixes Arthur and retouches his hardware, and Jim studies the auto-dock. When he explains to Aurora that the device can be used to put her back to hibernation in the infirmary, she refuses to accept it. One auto-dock is all that is available, and she does not want Jim to be alone again. Even if they do not reach Homestead II, she chooses to stay awake and live her remaining days with him on the ship. In the end, Jim gives Aurora the ring he had planned to give her. 88 years later, after waking up from hibernation, the crew members reach Homestead II. They are surprised to see trees and trailing vines on the ship, as well as vegetation and birds. As Aurora's voice reads the story, it describes how they met and then went on to spend their happy lives together on the ship.